We're going to move on to topic number 7. We're going to leave baseball and head to F1. And, you know, we're still in the summer break part of F1. It's coming back shortly. But we've been talking a lot about Max Verstappen, a lot about Lewis Hamilton, their rivalry that seems to continue to build and build. And Brendan, you wanted to compare this rivalry between Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton to Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost from back in the 80s and early 90s era of F1 racing.
Yeah, no, to me, I mean, it's a clear distinction that these two are basically the same rivalry, all right? So I'll get to that. I will definitely get to that. I've got a mouth load for these F1 topics, okay? But first, hey, if you're new to Comeback Sports, give us a subscribe, give us a like, okay? We're on a mission to 1,000 subs, and you F1 fans are really the ones that are driving our subs right now. Give us a subscribe, give us a like. But I've quickly got to address some of these people, once again, saying that we're fake news or biased news. This is not a news channel. This is an opinionated sports show. You get to call in that number that's down the bottom. Call in, give us your opinion, tweet at us your opinion. This is an opinionated sports show. We back our opinions with facts, stats, and common sense. Okay, this is not fake news. Okay, but let's move on to the big topic. All right, so let's move on to Hamilton versus Verstappen, like Senna versus Prost. I really think that this rivalry is really similar, okay? Similar for a lot of reasons, okay? Obviously, the crashes that they've come together, the big crash for Verstappen and Lewis at Silverstone can be compared to the big crash between Senna and Prost at Suzuka in Japan, okay? I know the championship was on the line there between Senna and Prost, but I still think it was a big moment between rivals that showed, man, this is not going to get any better between the rivalry, or I shouldn't say better because it is better for us as fans, but I'm saying their relationship as rivals is not getting any better. It's getting more bitter, I think. But I think it's crazy, and it's not exactly that the respect is lost between the two, okay? And I think the respect was lost between Senna and Prost clearly over the years, with them just getting agitated, first being teammates together and having that not go well after a while, but then coming together so many times and then having to battle each other so many times for the title, knowing that it was going to come down to one of those two. That rivalry just got bitter over the years. Where I think this thing that's a little different with Max and Lewis is I don't think it's got to that bitter point just yet. Not to say that it won't, but I don't think it's got to that point just yet. I still think there is a huge amount of respect between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. You've even seen it after the qualifying. They're generally giving each other the pound and giving each other the fist. So I think that's really their sign of respect is still continuing on, which is a good sign to see. I honestly wish that some of the F1 fans would take a cue from both of these drivers and just be more civil about this situation and about this rivalry, okay? I understand it's a passionate sport and we all have our favorites, whether it be Lewis or Max. But, man, let's just be more civil and have more respect for each other when the rivalry comes down, because I honestly think the two guys that maybe it should be bitter between, it's not even yet, Max and Lewis. I think the respect is still there. They're still showing it to each other, but clearly they are pushing each other to the limits now on the track, which I think that eventually will start to push each other off the track, which we got to see a little bit from Max Verstappen in that interview where he kind of just lost it and said, I'm sick of these questions. I don't want to hear it anymore. Okay, so I think it's really starting to get to that point where we might see when we come back from the summer break, if these two come together at Spa or Monza or one of the races coming up, if this action continues, that it might build up to that bitter point like Senna and Prost. But I think the biggest comparison that you make with the drivers here, these four drivers, is that you have arguably four of the best drivers ever on the grid in Formula One. Ayrton Senna, obviously one of the best drivers ever. Alain Prost, a multiple champion, one of the best drivers ever, in my opinion. Once again, opinionated show. And then you've got Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen, the two best drivers on the grid right now, clearly. And like I said, I would go out to reach and say two of the best F1 drivers ever. And I know Max Verstappen is young and he's still got a lot to prove, and he doesn't have a championship yet. But I've said on this show many of times that Max is going to be a future F1 champion. And you've just seen it by what he puts out over these years. Even when he came in as a teenager, he was a great driver. He's just getting better and better and better. So I think, like I said, between these four drivers, you have four of the best drivers ever on the F1 grid, and they're going head to head. So you've got two different generations with two of the best drivers ever going head to head. So I think, yeah, this is a rivalry that you've got to compare inevitably.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's clearly two drivers at the top of their game. You know, is how these are similar with Verstappen and Hamilton, and then Arton and with Senna, and then of course Prost. You know, I think there are some differences too that we can kind of compare, because Senna and Prost were only like 5 years apart, where you have Hamilton and Verstappen that are like 13, you know, so Verstappen's still the young gun trying to make a name for, I mean, he's made a name for himself, obviously, but he's still kind of trying to climb that ladder where Lewis Hamilton is been, you know, one of the greatest drivers ever, without question. The dominance he's had over the past decade, you know, puts him up there in the upper echelon. And like we've said, Verstappen's probably going to get there, but he's only 23. You know, the other thing is, too, is that Senna and Prost were teammates with McLaren for I'm not sure exactly how many years, but they used to be the top two cars for McLaren, and there were races where they would bump into each other and get knocked out of the race. And it was like, it's not like it's two different teams that have a crash and they ruin each other's race, or one driver crashes and the other driver benefits from it. These two guys were on the same team, and they messed up each other's races in the past. So that's kind of where it started to get heated, and they went their separate ways. And then I know towards the end, I think it was even Prost's last race is when Senna actually won, and then I think Prost was either second or third. He's on the podium with him. Senna, you know, lifted him up onto the top of the podium, and they stood up there together, which was pretty cool. Their relationship definitely was repaired towards the end of their career, which is always seems to be what happens here. Whereas I think, like you mentioned before, Verstappen and Hamilton, I think it's more the fans of the two racers are the ones that kind of nip at each other's heels, rather than Verstappen and Hamilton, the drivers themselves. I think there's a mutual respect there. And like I said, with the separation in age, I think Verstappen has grown up kind of idolizing Hamilton, whereas with Prost and Senna, they are so close in age that that's not really the case. But when it comes to two racers at the top of their game, going at it head to head, they're, you know, at the top of the grid in every race each time, and they're trading podiums and that sort of thing. This is definitely a good comparison between these four racers.
Yeah, no, like I said, I think it's a comparison that you inevitably have to make. And you know, like I said, it's really one of those things. You got four of the best drivers ever, you know, in two different generations. You got two of the greatest drivers going at each other, trying to win the title. And I think that's really what we know. We all know that's what they're going for, you know, and they know that too. And every point matters. So I'm expecting this, you know, rivalry to just increase and get tighter here. But I think, yeah, like you said, you got to compare it to that Senna and Prost rivalry being just as big, where I think even still now in 2021, people still talk about that rivalry. And I still think it's just really one of these things where we've seen the passion be so big from both sides here for Max and Lewis that I just inevitably see this growing to be a rivalry that's going to be just as big. And remember, it's a rivalry that's going to continue into the new era of F1 because Lewis Hamilton has signed a 2-year extension, and we all know Max Verstappen is going to be around for many, many more years. So, hey, I think this is a rivalry that's going to continue. It's just, will there be another driver that wants to stick his nose in there and get himself into this rivalry next year in 2022?
Folks, if you like this show, you're watching it right now on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube page. That's Comeback Sports on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, Comeback Sports. And then all the cut-ups that our awesome producer, Ben Kudo, puts together after the show, that'll all filter to your YouTube channel. You don't have to go search for it. It's just right there in your subscriptions.